Is the road I can call my own, that I left, that I lost so long ago. All these years I have wandered, oh, when will I know there's a way, there's a road that will lead me home. After wind, after rain, when the dark is done, as I wake from a dream in the gold of day, through the air there's a calling from far away. There's a voice I can hear that will lead me home. Rise up, follow me, come away is the call, with the love in your heart as the only song. There is no such beauty as where you belong. Rise up, follow me, I will lead you
I'll start again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the album release party for the next chapter of VOCES8's album, After Silence, which is based on that fantastic quote by Aldous Huxley. After silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. Now, this is the third of 4 chapters in the project that we're releasing today, and it's called After Silence 3 Redemption. This show is actually groundbreaking for many reasons. During this period of isolation, we're working really hard to train ourselves to be able to operate in a post-COVID world. And to that end, this is my first ever simulcast, meaning that I hope I'm going out live currently on Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. I'm also continuing to develop my skills on the broadcast platform software, which I used for the first time earlier this week as part of Choral Question Time. And many of you wanted to know what that software was called. So it's called OBS, and you can go and check it out for yourselves. It's a wonderful streaming platform. Also, for the first time ever, I've been creating some content in advance so that I can share many different things with you across today's show, which will include interviews with all members of the group and other exciting guests, and a competition to win a pre-release copy of the After Silence Compendium album, which isn't actually out until July, so stay tuned for that. And I'll also be featuring all of the music from the new album, which is out today. Oh, and how could I possibly forget my special studio guests who've all got into that party spirit? Now, I've said in all of my choral question time shows that these sessions do work best if they're interactive. So the onus is on you for that one to get commenting, and we will really look forward to interacting with you on that chat and in that way. I've also been asking for all of your feedback as well, because we're trying to develop our ability to use these digital presentations, as I say, in that post-COVID world. So please be sure to tell us how it is for you, things you'd like to see us do perhaps a little bit differently. We'd love to hear from you. Now, I said this is the third chapter of After Silence, and for those of you who perhaps haven't caught up with the project before, I thought I'd start by just playing you a little 90-second reel about the project. So here that comes. Now, as I've said, today is marking the release of the third of the albums in this particular project, and it's called Redemption. This particular chapter explores the quest for spiritual or emotional deliverance. And the music we've selected sort of straddles two twin poles, one of spiritual fulfillment and one of human frailty, or you may wish to look at those as well as optimism and doubt. The first track on the album is something that the group's never sung before, and I caught up with Johnny and Blake, and we had a little bit of a chat about that. I'm now joined by Blake and Johnny to introduce that first piece on this new album. So thanks so much for joining me, guys. Who would like to tell us a little bit about this piece?
I'll go. So this is a piece by Chesnikov. It's called Spasenie Soldela. It's pretty well known in the States. That's where I came across it. And in fact, I did suggest this to be part of the album. It's known in the States as Salvation is Created. That's its English title. And choirs, I think all over the country do perform this piece, but it's not quite made its way over to the UK yet. So I was really excited when this one got on the disc. What else can we add about this one?
Well, it's very beautiful, isn't it? I like the fact it's very hymnal in style. I actually think it's, for me, one of the nicest things about the piece is the opening that you guys sing.
Right.
Probably helps that I'm not singing, so I can enjoy it a little bit more. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a beauty from simplicity type piece, isn't it? In many ways, very effective. The other thing I love about it is that it's got the lowest note on the album in it. Here we have the bass in the group.
Yeah, I think the whole piece is kind of the lowest piece on the whole album.
Very Russian in that sense.
Yeah, we recorded it in the middle of the last winter, and fortunately, I happened to have a little bit of a cold during the sessions, and it was the first thing we did in the day. So I made sure I got up as late as possible and sort of ran into the sessions without having said anything to anyone on the way to try and get out those bottom notes. I think it's a bottom B at the in the end of the first section.
It's funny you say that, Johnny, because I actually probably could also sing a bottom B during that session. I was really sick, if you can remember.
You were, yeah.
But you still sound really good.
Yeah, it's funny because there's probably about at least 10 or 15 takes of me cracking really badly in that opening section. So I'm glad you chose the ones that are much more beautiful. So thanks for editing my voice there, Barney, and making it
my absolute pleasure. Now I'm asking quick fire questions to everybody, the same quick fire questions to everybody that I speak to from the group as part of this show today. So let's say Blake's going to answer this first one first. Blake, what is your favourite track on this new chapter of the album?
Well, I really love the Mahler, Ich bin der Welt. And I like that one in particular because I got to prepare the score for that one. So I spent a long time sort of revoicing the Gottwald arrangement, which is 16 voices, and putting it into 8 voices for VOCES8. And then we included Mary Bevan, the soprano soloist, and an oboe as well. So that was really fun seeing that come to life.
And we'll have a little bit more about that later in the show. And now, Johnny, if you had to pick a favourite, what would you go for?
From this section or from the whole album?
From this section, yeah.
I think the Bach, for me.
Okay, I'm going to put some pressure on you here to pick a single movement.
A single movement. The trio, I think. Actually, no, I tell you what, I think it's the soprano solo, the third movement.
Yeah, third movement.
Doch bin uns bleibe ich vergnügt. And I really like that one because the last line of the text there is Christ is what is right is always right.
Yes.
And I really like that. Ewig gerecht. I think it's a really important line for the whole work. And actually, that's something that really stuck with me when Elle was recording it in Cambridge.
Okay, and if we had
you should have stuck with the trio, Johnny, because you have it right here. This was the
trio. This is the trio.
You have the trio right here. I should have stuck with that. Yeah.
Magic. Now, if I widen the net then to the whole album, Blake? What's your favourite one on the whole album? Would you stick with the Mahler, or would you change to something else?
I'm trying to remember what else is on the full thing. I actually really like the Jonathan Dove piece. Just yesterday, Barney and I got to
Virtue or Three Kings.
Virtue, yeah. Big fan of that one, and I'm excited to hear what people think of it because it's not really reached very many ears across the world yet. So
yeah, that's true. We've only
pretty exciting
a handful of times, and the recording doesn't come out till June. So watch out for that one. Johnny, what would you go with?
For me, it was a piece that we did on the first chapter of this album. It was the Birds, Ne Erescaris, and Civitas.
Who produced the score for that?
As it happens, it was me. But I mean, it's one of my favourite pieces in the entire world, and I think that you can really hear the pain and the suffering that was in all of the Catholic composers' minds at the time. And you can really hear that through the sort of allegory of Jerusalem being desolate in the second part of the piece. So I think that's a really touching moment for me, and something that I've been singing for basically my whole life as well. So
okay, and any fond memory of the sessions? Blake, you want to go first? Do you have a fond memory?
Plenty of fond memories, yeah. Both good fondness and bad fondness, both, I think. There's quite some funny moments. Moving back to the Spasenie piece, we had help with our Russian diction from a very good friend of ours who also writes quite a bit of music for the group, Alexander Levine, and he sent through a voice memo of him pronouncing all of the Russian correctly, but basically decided to do it exclusively in vocal fry, I think, and we're very appreciative for you doing this, Alec, but for some reason it's all in this Spasenie. So pretty much whenever we see the title of the piece now, we all just can't help but do that. So
okay, and Johnny?
I say what we recorded the Mahler and also a piece by Bach. It was the Jesu Joy Mazaring in Islington, in St. John, in Islington, and I really enjoyed, particularly the Mahler, when we were collaborating with Nick Deutsch and Mary Bevan, and that's a wonderful space, and having that collaboration, I think, with two sort of consummate musicians was a real pleasure on a musical level for me.
And then we're going to be playing that later on. Both of you have spoken about that piece now, so something people look forward to. And then an embarrassing memory or something funny or silly that happened in the session. You got any?
Yeah, I managed to crash the recording of Andrea's ocarina solo. For the long road, I think, the Eschenwalds, which I think is on the last part of this disc.
No, it's coming up today.
Is it this one? Okay, right. Yeah. And when she was recording that in Cambridge, I managed to walk right through one of the takes, and I was quite embarrassed about that because I'd had no idea what was going on.
Okay, and Blake.
Well, there's quite a bit of illness for a lot of these sessions, and I think potentially the low point for me was during the Sistina, the Monteverdi Sistina, which actually turned out really well. I'm really surprised and very glad for that. But there was a unison crack from both Chris and I on this rising melody. Dun, 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 dun. We both were like in thirds moving, and we both just yelped it, basically Tarzan, for that middle section. It was just one of
Maybe
those things.
we should someday put an outtake CD out.
Oh man.
Oh no.
Pretty sure that would ruin most of our careers. But
thank you very much for joining me today. We're now going to play the piece that you've introduced. So this is Pavel Chesnikov's Spasenie Sodela, or Salvation is Created. That was the first track off our new album released today, After Silence 3 Redemption, Spasenie Sodela by Pavel Chesnikov, our first foray into the work of Chesnikov, so maybe some more where that came from. Thanks very much for tuning in. This is our album launch party. We've got so many people up having fun with us, so many familiar names, people we know really well logging in, so it's great to see you all. My plan today is to share with you all the music on this new album, and I've spent some time gathering some content from other members of the group as well, so that we can all share it with you together in this time of isolation. So our next track is by the composer Erik Eschenwalds, and we first performed Erik's work, I think, in 2015, his beautiful transcendent piece Stars, which was recorded as part of our Looks album. Since then, we've always looked for opportunities to do other works by Erik's, but those of you who know his output well will realise that a lot of the time we're unable to perform his music because it's scored for more than the 8 voices that we have. And if you've seen the playlist for this album, you'll realise that one of those pieces that's scored beyond our means is The Long Road. And therefore, we needed to do something to solve that problem. And to talk to you a little bit about that, I spoke to Chris and Andrea. So I'm pleased to be joined by Andrea and Chris, who are going to help me introduce you our next piece, which is The Long Road. So would one of you like to talk about the piece first of all?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is The Long Road by Erik Eschenwalds, and it's a really beautiful piece, really quite well known in the choral world now. But it's actually a setting of a poem that was written by a Latvian poet, Paulina Bārda, whose husband was also a really eminent poet, and he died really before his time, and the poem was written by her as a kind of a lament for the lost love of losing people too early here in earthly ways, and trying to think about sort of what it means to love in a more sort of celestial way, sort of beyond what we have here on earth. But that time and life is too short to love wholly and fully.
Now, this is a piece that we actually haven't sung before as a group, and the main reason for that is that it's scored beyond our limitations of 8 voices. So in order to be able to include it on the CD, we had to write and ask Erik Eschenwalds' permission to see if we could make an adaptation, and he was very kind in allowing us to do that, and that adaptation was done by Chris. So Chris, tell us, what did that involve?
Well, I suppose having got the permission, the last thing you want to then do is mess it up. So I had to think about it quite carefully. I think what are the sort of trademarks of this piece, and perhaps of Erik's style in general? I'd say probably a focus on chords. These beautiful, thick harmonies are very, very important to his style. So it was about finding a way of preserving those just with the 8 voices, which I think we've managed to do. There's a little bit of jiggery pokery happening here and there, but we've got it all the way through. The other thing is this beautiful melody, and finding a way to keep that flowing, so because when you change parts around, you could end up with one person singing that bit and then Andrea singing that bit and else. So basically I had to find a way of getting the melody to remain in basically the same part all the way through, so you get that sort of continuity.
I think you've done a very good job, if I may say so.
Very much.
You even managed to typeset the score beautifully, which is something that defeats many people, myself included. So
I watched Johnny Pacey's lectures for that.
Now, Andrea, you've been in VOCES8 for almost 12 years, have you? And had an illustrious career, performed in many of the world's top concert halls. Who knew that you could make a debut on this album?
I know.
Andrea makes her ocarina debut in this track, which was particularly wonderful. I produced the session myself. I think you've even got the ocarina there, have you, Andrea?
I have the trusty ocarina. Here it is.
Not a cheap one, I can tell you that.
One, and it's also, I mean, my experience of ocarinas was really what you got out of the Christmas cracker. You know, those tiny little plastic things with maybe like 3 or 4 holes on them if you're lucky. But this is quite a complex ceramic job, so it took me a couple of days to get my fingers around it. But
you're a flautist by training, aren't you? So
I am, yes. I played a few different sort of wind instruments, recorder, tin whistle, bits and pieces. So yeah,
you're definitely the best person for the job.
Oh, thanks.
The marvelous job you did as well.
As well as the sort of 4 top B flats that you had to do in the course of the piece. Well, you know.
I kind of
okay, guys. Thank you very much. Just before you go, I want to ask you 4 quick fire questions that I'm asking everybody to put you on the spot a little bit. So first one, favourite track, maybe Andrew, you go first. Favourite track on this chapter of the album?
Oh, that's difficult. I'm probably going to say the final movement of the Bach cantata, which is the final thing on the disc, because it's my favourite bit of Bach.
Okay, good choice, Chris.
I was actually going to say basically the same thing. I think that Chacon's wonderful, but the Bach in general is really interesting. It's very early Bach, and you can hear him sort of working out in his head how he's going about writing the music, but it shows that genesis of genius.
But yeah, of the cantata series to follow.
Yeah.
Next one then. Let's open that question up. If you had to pick a favourite track from the whole album, Chris, do you want to go first with this one?
Yeah, probably a predictable answer. My favourite piece, I think, is probably the Hymn to St Cecilia by Benjamin Britten.
Yeah, it comes out in the 4th chapter, so it's not out yet, so people have to wait for that one.
But it's a marvelous piece, an epic piece, one I've wanted to record for ages, and to do it in with just 8 voices as well. You know, it's one of these things that you don't normally do. It's normally a bigger amount of singers, but it's a wonderful piece and a wonderful poem by W.H. Auden as well. I've just been reading a bit of Auden's poetry, and it's really, really a wonderful meeting of 2 absolute geniuses.
Yeah, 2 great minds. Andrea.
I'm going to go with Bring Us, O Lord, which is out on the first EP. Partly because I've spent so much of my life singing that piece with different choirs and different settings from, you know, the age of 10 or 11 up to now. So it's been a piece that's been with me the whole journey. So it kind of represents what this album is about as well. You know, it's one of the things that really being part of something that's much bigger than yourself and is able to express something that you can't alone.
Okay, nice answer. Chris? No, you've had that in your question. My memories, it's going, you know, too much isolation. Let's go. Let's go on to that. Need a few more Jaffa cakes. Let's go on to the next the next question then, which is a fond memory, if there are any. Recordings can be a very difficult process. So a fond memory from the session.
Memory, apart from the gin that you have on the train home.
Always the best bit is.
One of my favourite ones is actually it's related to Bach again, but it's actually sitting in the listening room whilst the 3 of you were recording that trio in the Bach, the 5th movement. That was Barney and Johnny and Blake singing, and it's just got this mean cello part.
Yeah, Johnny Byers playing the cello.
Yeah, and it's just so
constant.
It's like it just keeps going and going for a good, you know, 3 or 4 minutes of pure joy. So
okay, Chris.
I don't know. I mean, there are obviously so many great moments. I think we had, for a lot of the time, we had a lot of time as a group to put the effort in to really experimenting with different things in the session. So that was quite liberating in a way. I'm obviously working with Adrian, who's a wonderful producer. It's a really collaborative process. I always really enjoy going back to my old university chapel, Trinity College Chapel, where I can't remember what we recorded there, but a lot of it, a lot of the entire album has been recorded there. Marvelous acoustic in that beautiful antechapel. So I have always enjoyed recording there.
Okay, and do either of you have an embarrassing or funny memory of the sessions?
Not really, apart from just how cold it was when we recorded the Bach. And I was watching that video, I think I've got a scarf on, and there's these massive industrial heaters behind the chamber organ that were keeping everyone warm.
Chilly in churches when you record in the winter.
I mean, honestly, my ocarina debut was a fairly funny moment, I would say.
Yeah.
It was a first, and there's just that photo of me in an empty church playing ocarina, apparently by myself. So that's quite good.
maybe you could send that through, and I'll see if I can find it. Okay, well, look, guys, thanks very much for joining me. We're now going to play for our viewers. We're going to play The Long Road by Eric Sessenvaltz in an adaptation for 8 voices by our very own Christopher Moore, and with sparklingly brilliant ocarina and the occasional bit of good singing as well from Andrea. So thanks so much, guys, and take care and see you soon.
See ya.
The Long Road by Eric Eschenwalds in a new adaptation for 8 voices, which was done by our very own Christopher Moore. And lovely to hear Andrea's beautiful ocarina playing. I still remember receiving the ocarina through the post. I ordered it from a specialist shop in Germany and thinking, oh, this will be really straightforward. And it sort of comes with this instruction manual. So I had a little go at it myself and thought, no, I'm way out of my depth here. So I remember walking into rehearsal one morning and just giving it to Andrea and saying, please just deal with this. And how brilliantly she turned her hand to it. So thank you very much, Andrea. Just a reminder that you've joined us for our album launch party, where we're celebrating the release of our 3rd chapter of our After Silence project, which is celebrating our 15th anniversary as a group. This particular chapter is called After Silence 3 Redemption, and you'll be able to find that on all streaming services as of today. We have a physical album that's coming out on the 24th of July, but a little bit more about that later on, where you'll have a chance also to win a pre-released copy. So on to our next piece. Now, whilst the score for The Long Road required a small adaptation, our next work required something on a much grander scale. Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen is the 4th song from a cycle set by Gustav Mahler in 1901 of poetry by Friedrich Rückert. And Mahler's original score, I'm sure many people will know it, is for orchestra and vocal soloist. So it would appear to be quite a big stretch to bring those very rich sonorities which Mahler set into the sound world of an 8-part vocal ensemble. Now, those people who know the choral repertoire very well will know that in 1982, the German arranger, Clitus Gottwald, made an adaptation of this very score for a cappella 16-part choir, I suppose more specifically 4 choirs of 4 voices. And when we were looking for repertoire for this project, it is celebrating our 15th anniversary, so as well as finding music that we'd sung successfully over the 15 years, we also wanted to explore new sound worlds and new ideas. And when Blake suggested to me that he loved this score in the Gottwald arrangement, he also said that he thought he could adapt the 16-voice version down for 8 voices. Since then, he described that as being a little bit harder than he'd originally imagined it would be. Now, once he produced that initial score, he spent many hours in hotel rooms and on planes, labouring over it. It really was a labour of love. Once he produced that score, he and I sat down and had a look at it, and we considered whether or not it carried enough the original intentions of Mahler. And I think through our discussions, it became quite clear that perhaps inviting a soloist for the main vocal melody, and also bringing in the unique sound of the cor anglais, which plays a really important obligato part in the original score. We thought adding those 2 things would probably pay dutiful homage to Mahler's original intentions. And of course, it would also offer us, as an 8-part group, the opportunity to voice the rest of the accompaniment of the score. And the hope was very much that it would provide us with a new challenge as a group, something we'd not done before, and also a sound world on the album that was a little bit different to everything else. So just to kind of clean the palette a little bit when you're listening through to a compendium album. You'll be able to see, I'm going to put up in just a minute, a little reel of something I made earlier, which starts with Mahler's orchestral score, and then is followed with a couple of pages of Gottwald's 16-part a cappella score, and then our new 8-voice adaptation, which was done by Blake, and that also includes Mahler's own cor anglais and solo vocal part. Whilst I put that up, just so you can appreciate how this piece has moved from where it was originally to where we've taken it, I've also, just to give you a bit of context, put in the background Anne-Sophie von Otter singing this particular song with the NDR Symphony Orchestra conducted by John Elliott Gardner, and you'll be able to find that CD if you'd like to hear it in its original form on Deutsche Grammophon. So have a little listen to this. Now, in all honesty, we turned up to a church in London on a very crisp January morning, having, of course, practiced the score a little bit as a group, but having never put it together with our two guest soloists. And we had absolutely no idea whatsoever as to whether this session was going to yield any fruit for us. Now, thankfully it did, and in a large part that has been to the credit of our two guests in the track, who are soprano Mary Bevan and oboist Nick Deutsch. And I spent a little bit of time yesterday catching up with the two of them, talking about who they are and the process involved here in the piece. I'm thrilled to be joined now by soprano Mary Bevan and oboist Nick Deutsch. Thank you very much to you both for being with us. And a special thank you from me, and I hope all our audience as well, for coming and recording this beautiful piece of Mahler with us, which I'm about to preview for everybody. I'd love to start by allowing the two of you to introduce yourselves. So we're going to start with Mary. And Mary, just before you tell everybody who you are and what you do, I'm just going to make you blush a little bit by reading, or at least I'm going to try, by reading a little review from the Independent here in London, who wrote about your bewitching Susanna, that it was entirely appropriate that the first night should conclude with you receiving this year's Exceptional Young Talent Award from the Critics Circle, because the perfection of your singing is allied to a natural dramatic gift. I've picked that quote because I think your natural dramatic gift is highlighted in this track. But before we talk about that, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, well, that's a lovely quote. I've forgotten all about that one. I must frame it.
Right.
I'm Mary Bevan. I'm a soprano. I've long been affiliated, worked with VOCES8 and lots of lovely concerts. And I sing opera, lieder, and oratorio. So I try and keep some nice equal balance between those three things. And I work a lot in England and quite a lot abroad as well. So yeah, I'm 35, so I'm not really that young anymore, but it was nice to hear young artist as opposed
I'm gutted that you're a little bit younger than me. Can I just say that now?
I'm younger than you.
That's like, yeah, I'm 36, so that's not fair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Nick, we know you because you very kindly invited us to come and sing at the Australian National Academy of Musicians, where I think you're currently the head honcho. And the idea actually came to us to invite you to play the oboe, because we did a B minor mass together, and you and I had that wonderful obligato aria, Quisedes, which I will never forget. So we know that you do that in Australia, but how else do you fill your time?
Well, yeah, I lead a bit of a double life in the fact that I'm based in Leipzig, Germany, with my family, and then spend about 22 weeks a year in Australia. Unless you're in lockdown with viruses sort of going around, where you try and combine both worlds from one place. So the days start very early and finish very late. But apart from the responsibilities in Australia, I'm still very active as an oboist, working with a full concert schedule, as well as teaching at the Hochschule für Musik here in Leipzig.
So show off a little bit and tell us the orchestras that you play with regularly. Go on.
Oh, well, look, I mean, variety is the spice of life. So I like to vary. The orchestras, I do have a major passion for opera. So I'm very actively involved with many opera houses, mainly sort of around Munich. I was a member of the Frankfurt Opera for many years. And also just work with orchestras like Chamber Orchestra of Europe and Camerata Salzburg, the Budapest Festival Orchestra, just to name a few.
Anyone will have you. I'm sure.
Yeah. I share my
freelance life goes, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, look, you guys joined us for this beautiful Mahler song. Now, one thing that made me chuckle quite a lot, Mary, was the fact that when I asked you to do this, you first of all wrote back and were like, yeah, I'd love to. And then about 5 minutes later, it came another text message. Does it really matter that I've not done much Mahler before? And that made me chuckle, because actually I've never done Mahler before either. In fact, I've done it once. I've done the 8th Symphony in the proms when I was a little boy, but that was over 20 years ago. So very, very new repertoire for us. And this song is actually taken from a set of 5 songs that Mahler wrote based on the writing of Rückert Lieder. So let's talk about the text first. I actually want to read it out because I want all of our viewers to understand the intensity of it. So just bear with me. I am lost to the world with which I used to waste so much time. It has heard nothing from me for so long, it may well believe I'm dead. It doesn't matter to me if it takes me for dead. I have nothing to say about it, for I really am dead to the world. I am dead to the world's tumult, resting in a quiet place. I live alone in my heaven, in my love, in my song. Now, just reading that makes me well up a little bit. So as a singer, it must be a huge responsibility to take a text like that and have to convey it to an audience.
Yeah.
What's your process? How do you go about living that text?
Well, the first step just comes simply by reading a poem as you've just done, because just to read it and to have the music, you have to understand that with a good composer, like an amazing composer like Mahler, that most of the work is already done for you. So you don't need to, in a way, get in the way. As a performer, don't get in the way of the text and the music working together. I personally don't do work on, I work on the text in the sense that I need to know exactly what each word means when I sing it, but then you have to just sort of let your voice and hope that your voice is going to be enough to convey the text and let Mahler's work speak, rather than sort of doing something with it that's, I mean, obviously it's important to be very clear, and so the listener can really hear every single word and those consonants that in German is so wonderful to sing.
Yeah. Now, Nick, picking up on that idea of you loving opera, does that have anything to do with text? Oh, you've gone sideways and upside down. How have you managed that? That was impressive. I know you're Australian,
not even from Australia. Sorry, I got thrown out for some reason.
That's all right. Yeah, because you said you loved opera. So does that have anything to do with the text? And when you're playing, so when you're playing this piece, are you inside the text? Helps, of course, that you speak German in this instance, I suppose.
To a certain extent, I mean, of course, before you record anything or prepare any work, you sort of look at the text to try and get sort of the feeling of what the piece is about. So, yeah, I mean, one does try and approach the somber attitude, but I mean, I suppose more than anything, I mean, I always try and sing when I play my instrument. So actually working with singers is a perfect sort of ideal to surround yourself with. I was attracted to the oboe because I find it's the instrument that, for me at least, is closest to the human voice. So it was, especially wonderful working with such a choir and Mary as sort of a partner there in crime, so to speak, as to match each other's. Yeah.
Okay, we might pick up on that idea a little bit later. I have another question for Mary for now. You mentioned in your little introduction that you do a lot of concert work, including some fantastic things with us. And you've also had, I know, a lot of success on CD. I'd love to draw our listeners' attention to your latest release, The Divine Muse, which is works by Haydn, Schubert and Wolf. And there's also a CD in 2017 that you released, which I know got nominated for some awards, where you did music by Duparc, Fauré, Schubert and Debussy, to name just a few, and both with pianist Joseph Middleton. And I have also been listening in this period of isolation to your Handel's Queen's album with the London Early Opera and Bridget Cunningham. And there's some fierce coloratura on there. So we know you're hugely experienced. And one can imagine that when you do a piece like this with a symphony orchestra, the colours that they can bring for you, and also the sheer volume that they provide, means that you probably have to approach the piece technically in a certain way in order to carry that, and thinking about to the back of the hall as well. But here, as Nick's just mentioned, you've literally got 8 voices and a cor anglais and a microphone that's 2 feet from your face. So how does it change? Is there something that you have to do? I'm sure there's a lot of singers listening. Is there something you have to do differently in order to manage the situation?
Yeah. When I first looked at the music, I immediately noticed that it was quite low and probably normally sung by a mezzo. I have quite a low soprano voice, but it still doesn't change the fact that it doesn't come naturally to me to sing loudly in that low middly register around an E at the bottom of the stave, E, F, G, and C, middle C. It's quite hard, as sopranos will know, to make a loud sound in that context. And if I had been approached by an orchestra to do those songs, I probably would have had to think twice, just because it would have taken longer maybe to have got myself to the level of singing loud enough against an orchestra in those sort of low mezzo-y songs. and you need a lot of breath control because they are long phrases in this song. But because it was with you guys and I knew that it was going to be a recording, it is a different, very different kettle of fish. And I had the freedom, I guess, of being able to use much less actual voice and therefore do longer phrases.
Yeah.
And then I could really let rip on the big bits that are higher up. So I guess I had more freedom in the recording with you lot, but at the same time, then it's a lot more pressure in a different way that you wouldn't get in a live performance, because the microphone is picking up every single tiny little thing that you do. You can't just blast it and cover up the paper up the cracks in that sense. You have to be really bang in tune, because VOCES8, I'm sure, as all your listeners will know, they sing bang in tune and they're singing all the instrumental parts, so they have to do that. And whereas we as opera singers, we're not really used to kind of go ooh, right in the middle of a texture like that. We sort of vibrate around it. So I had to get a lot of vocal control working to sing it, which was pressure in its own way. So I guess, it's half a dozen of one, six of the other. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, well, I can compliment you because I edited this, and I have to say that the level of consistency that you provided in all of those areas to me was slightly depressing, because I'm not sure I managed to match it with my own singing on the day. So you did very, very well. Nick, we've mentioned the word cor anglais a number of times. It's an instrument I love. It's a really unique sound, but can you tell us a little bit about it? Because it's related to the oboe, isn't it? Which probably is more famous brother.
Yeah, cousin, so to speak. It's
Cousin,
it's basically it's a fifth lower than the oboe, so it's written in F, and it was an instrument used actually quite often, sort of in Baroque times. I mean, of course, Bach wrote many arias for corno da caccia, and then sort of fell out for quite a while until César Franck introduced it in a symphonic context as well. And of course, Mahler used it a lot as sort of a tenor type of oboe sound, sits sort of just between the oboe and the bassoons. Yeah, it's sort of perfect, as I said, in a very singing manner, and the way that he actually juxtaposes the voice to the oboe, the cor anglais, in this instance, in these songs.
And can I pick your brain a little bit about during the session itself? Because you mentioned that when you play, you play in a way that feels like you're singing. Did you have to change your mindset or the way you were listening, or indeed playing, to work with a cappella as opposed to what you would do in an orchestra?
Oh, yes, totally. It was a 180-degree turn. I mean, contrary to what sort of Mary was saying, cor anglais always get a sign from the conductor because they want more. And all of a sudden, in this context, I was having to reduce the quantity of the air drastically. Also, the way it's recorded, the very close proximity of the microphones is, of course, very different to an orchestra where most of the sound is coming from the room. So from a technical aspect, perhaps. From a musical aspect, I think, I very much see it as a form of chamber music where you're trying to bounce off what your collaborative partners are doing. And so in that context, it felt very natural for me to try and emulate what was being sort of said around me. But of course, yeah, just from a technical aspect, definitely challenging in the fact that it's quite rare that you sing a cappella with 8 singers and a soloist.
Well, I was actually had the pleasure of standing next to you in the session, because the way the microphones are set, you were sort of over my shoulder, and I couldn't actually really turn around to look at you because you talked about the proximity. And of course, if I start singing in that direction, it doesn't work into the mics. But I do have this vivid memory of always feeling your energy coming over my right shoulder, which was something that will stay with me for a long time. We did have quite a lot of fun. Something else I'd love to drill down into a little bit is that we had quite a lot of fun in the session working on the intonation, because I think, you don't play it the same that we do here in the UK, but we also were working very much on tuning the oboe or the cor anglais to the choir. Could you just talk a little bit about those challenges?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose there were various challenges. One is, of course, recording in a church, which is not heated. So it means that playing a wind instrument if not playing for a minute or two, will actually lower the pitch of the instrument. So it's compensating for that. Of course, compensating for the fact that, of course, in Germany we play at 4:43, and I think another piece that we recorded on that day was with organ. That was at 4:38, so it was making that adjustment. And then, of course, there's the big sort of issue of harmonic functional harmony and temperament, and actually understanding the function of the note in a harmonic context and where you actually place it. So, if we're playing any given note, an E, for example, you'd place it very differently if the harmony was C major, where it's the major third, to if it was A minor, or C sharp minor, where it's all of a sudden the minor third, A minor, or A major, where it's the fifth. The function of the note changes, and it's of course something, when there's an a cappella group, it's even that much more impressive at how you can adjust to that, not having a constant which is there to compare yourself to. So they were definitely challenges, but I'm always up for challenges.
We overcame them. Well, I mean, I have to say that for me personally, and I think for the group, one of the things I talk about in my introductory note to the album is that we're trying to, of course, sing repertoire that the group's become known for over the last 15 years, but also just to push the boundaries of the repertory a little bit. And I think on the whole CD, this is one of the pieces in that respect that I'm most proud of, because we've taken really a song that's known in a completely different way, brought it into a really unique sound world, and so much of that success, I hope, is down to the fantastic artistry and skill of the two of you. So thank you so much for being involved in the project, because for me really feels like a bit of a milestone for the group to achieve something like this on disc, and we're really hugely grateful for your input. I'm very excited to share it with everybody now, so thank you very much indeed.
Congratulations on it. It looks amazing.
Thank you. Well, hopefully people will enjoy it, and thank you also for your brilliant performances.
Always a pleasure.
Totally.
Very nice to see so many people enjoying that and writing such nice comments on our feed. That was Gustav Mahler, sung by VOCES8, and we were joined there by beautiful soprano Mary Bevan and the beguiling cor anglais of Nick Deutsch. Thank you very much again to the two of them for that collaboration. We are here today celebrating the release of the third chapter of VOCES8's After Silence project. It's called After Silence Redemption. The full album's coming out on the 24th of July, and those of you who've been tuning in to my weekly choral question time will know that we have been running a competition giveaway each week for a pre-release copy of the album, which I received just here at my house in Cambridge this very week. We've had a couple of questions about the cover art on these sort of chapters of the album, and we chose for this album project some beautiful artwork called First Kiss, which is mixed media art by Debbie Loftus. And for each one of the chapters we have, I'll be able to show you from inside, we have a different image, and then we've used those images, you can see them here, 4 images. We've used those images to create artwork inside the booklet. So for example, here's the chapter about redemption. So you can look forward to that if you get your physical copy, which I'm going to run a competition for a pre-release copy giveaway now. So what do you have to do to take part? Well, all you have to do is listen to the piece of music that I'm about to play and see if you can answer my question. So today I'm going to play you a short excerpt of a Bach instrumental piece, and I'd like you to tell me which cantata Bach derived the opening chorus for from the work that I'm going to play. The details of how you can enter are going to be on the screen, but you just have to drop me an email, barnaby@voces8.com, and I'll be accepting answers until 5 p.m. UK time this coming Sunday. So it's about a 30-second excerpt. I think you'll probably recognise the piece when I do play it. So the question is, which cantata did Bach derive the opening chorus from this particular instrumental piece? See if you can find out. There we go. So if you can email me the correct answer, your name will go into a hat to win a pre-release copy here of the whole After Silence compendium. So good luck. Now let's go on to our next track from the album, and I caught up yesterday with Elle and Ewan to have a chat about that. So here I am with Eleanor and Ewan, and we are going to talk about the next piece I'm going to play, which is The Road Home. Now, this is something we've been singing on stage for quite a long time as a group. So would one of you two like to introduce that?
Yeah, of course. So we've been singing this a lot recently, and it's a piece by Stephen Paulus, and it's a tune taken from the 1835 Southern Harmony book, and he rearranged it for SATB. And it's a really beautiful piece about finding the road home, which means a lot to us. And I'm sure you can talk a little bit about what it means to him.
Yeah, of course. I find it a very calming piece of music to sing in our concerts. It often serves as a lead-in to something that's a bit more loud or a bit more dramatic. And I really find it a nice palate cleanser and a nice sort of calming aid for me in the middle of a concert situation, particularly.
Yeah, one of the things that sticks out to me is that we often talk to choirs about how we sing together. We talk a lot about taking a breath together, which of course we have to do, but this is a very good example of where we would all listen to the sopranos, because it's quite a homophonic piece, and so we're all forming our words along with Andrea and Eleanor. So see if you can hear that when we play the recording. Is there anything in the piece that you guys find particularly challenging? Something that you have to think hard about when we're singing it on stage?
Ooh, well, I think
yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
You want to go first? I'll go. I think actually just what you were saying about turning the words is one of the most challenging things. I guess for me, just being new to the group as well, it's one of the more difficult things to get into. Just the kind of specific listening that we have to do to get those words turning together. That's one of the main challenges I find with this piece.
Okay.
Yeah, I find it quite interesting because I go from singing with Andrea quite a lot of the time, and then she has this beautiful soprano solo at the end, and I start singing with Katie, and suddenly I have to change the way that I'm thinking about how I'm singing because I'm singing with a different person. I have to blend with them differently, so that's quite a challenge. But yeah, it's a really beautiful piece, and I love listening to Andrea soaring away next to me. So.
Okay, so we're going to play it. We're going to play it in just a minute. But before that, before I let you guys go, I've got some questions that I'm asking everybody. So we'll say Elle's going to answer them first, and then Ewan will follow. So first one, Elle, what's your favourite track on this part of the album? So what's your favourite track on Redemption? And you can't pick the whole cantata. You can pick a movement, but you can't pick the whole cantata.
Oh, I was going to say the entirety of the Bach. I do love it. I actually really like your trio. So there's a lovely trio in the middle. I know, believe it or not, I just think it's really beautiful music. So yeah, I enjoy that.
Insane cello part. Ewan, for you, what's your favourite?
Oh, for me, it's definitely the Mahler arrangement. I think Blake did such a good job of it. I think it's come out really well. I'm really excited for people to hear it.
Awesome. Okay, now let's widen the net a little bit then and say favourite track on the whole After Silence album.
Oh, found this really difficult one, but I'm going to have to go with Bring Us, O Lord God, which has already come out. Okay. But it's just an absolute, it's just so beautiful. I just love Harris.
That's on the Remembrance one. Okay, great. So, Ewan?
Yeah, I think for me, can I pick all of the Sestina madrigals from the Dirty Ocean EP?
If we're broadening the net that wide, then we'll let you have the Sestina.
Thank you very much. Because I do love those. I think they're just amazingly written pieces of music, and also I'm not singing on it, which gives me a nice kind of listening perspective that I can have on it. I can enjoy it a lot more.
Okay. Now, memories of the sessions. A fond memory of the session.
I really enjoyed singing with Mary, so that's just quite a new experience for us, and we sing a few bits in unison, and I really enjoyed singing with her and her blending to me as well as me to her. Really enjoyed that.
Great. Ewan?
I really enjoyed recording in Trinity College Chapel. I think it's not a building I've been in very often before, and it was one of my first sessions with the group, I think, as a recording context, and I really enjoyed it. It was amazing. Yeah.
Okay, and now to finish then, an embarrassing memory or a funny, something that sticks in your mind as being particularly funny from the sessions.
So mine is not musical at all. So I had one day where I rocked up and I'd used a particular shampoo and conditioner on my hair, and it changed my hair colour slightly. And Barney's compliment to me, Barney's wonderful compliment, was that I looked like a dog. That's what he compared me to.
Did you say that?
I think it was meant in a loving, heartfelt way, but I was like, oh.
Fantastic.
Okay, great. Blushing a little bit. Okay, thanks very much. Ewan, how about you?
Oh dear, I don't know. I don't know if I'm embarrassed or proud really, but just the amount of biscuits I managed to eat in all of those sessions. It was good. We were well catered for.
Well, yeah, I do the catering, so
a lot of Jaffa cakes.
I always, the funny thing is though, the thing with Jaffa cakes, if you buy one carton of Jaffa cakes, they go really quickly. So you think, you know what? I need a lot of Jaffa cakes. Then you buy like 5 cartons of Jaffa cakes, and you go back at the end of the day, and not even one carton's been eaten. It's a really funny phenomenon,
It's like too much of a feat, too many to eat in one go.
Same thing with when you serve Nutella or peanut butter. Exactly the same thing always happens. And we also have it with lemon and ginger tea in VOCES8 sessions as well.
Oh, yeah.
One box, it goes really quickly. Buy 2 and 1 box won't even get finished. So, okay, there we go. All right, well, thank you very much, guys. So we're now going to play you the beautiful Road Home. It's music by Stephen Paulus and a text by his wonderful lyricist, a guy called Michael Dennis Brown.
Tell me where is the road I can call my own, that I left, that I lost so long
was The Road Home by Stephen Paulus, sung as part of VOCES8's new album released today, After Silence, Chapter 3, Redemption. There's not much that's, of course, positive to say about here being in isolation. But one of the things that is really nice is that by doing things like this and also having a bit more time on our hands, we get to meet up and see people who perhaps we otherwise wouldn't have done. And just looking up and down this feed now, it's a just name after name of people who I haven't been in touch with for a very long time and wish I had. So welcome to you all, and thanks very much for tuning in. I always think that it's really nice that the group gets credit for sounding good on an album, but actually we rely a lot on the people who stand the other side of the microphones when we are doing our singing. And if you've ever recorded yourself or you've watched on YouTube one of the videos that we've put up which perhaps uses footage of recordings, then you'll realise that there is a lot going on other than just the 8 of us standing there having a good time singing together. I just wanted to unpick that a little bit for you and give you a little bit of a view behind the microphones. So yesterday I caught up with the production team from this After Silence project. That's Adrian Peacock, producer, and Dave Hynett, who is our engineer. And here's what they had to say. I'm pleased to be meeting here with our fantastic producer, Adrian Peacock.
Hi.
And our engineer, Dave Hynett, both of whom we couldn't have made After Silence without. So guys, thanks very much for coming and spending some time with us today. I'd like to start just by introducing you, or allowing you to introduce yourself to our listeners. So perhaps you'd show off a bit and let us know what sort of CDs you're making at the moment, where you've been, which groups you're working with.
Dave first, me first.
Whoever like to go. Who's the biggest show off?
Ooh, steady. I generally record, I suppose most of my schedule is choral work, probably 75% choral work. Pleased to be able to count, obviously, yourselves. King Singers I've worked with, Swingles, did a couple of projects with them a long time ago. Dave and I seem to have a good hold on the Oxford and Cambridge scene as well. So Trinity Cambridge, Queen's Oxford, Keble College Oxford, and then in London we look after the choir of Westminster Abbey. We have been looking after the choir of Westminster Cathedral. We did a big job at St Paul's. So pretty much the choral scene, and then myself, I get involved in some orchestral work. I was scheduled to go to Bergen to work with the Bergen Phil. That's just been postponed, but hopefully not long. The Norwegians seem to want to get moving pretty quickly. And some very interesting projects down in Bournemouth with the Symphony Orchestra. So it's a variety of things, and it's the variety which, of course, keeps me sane.
I imagine quite a lot of our viewers are American. Have you ever been that side of the Atlantic?
Oh, yeah. Well, the Crossing Choir in Philadelphia, I've done 4 or 5 things with them. That's an absolutely fantastic outfit with Donald Nally, and also a group based in Boston on Cape Cod called Skylark with Matthew Gard. So some interesting things happening that side as well.
And how about you, Dave? I suppose you do most of the work with Adrian, do you as well?
We do, yeah. I mean, most of our work is together. So the groups that he's listed, we tend to do together, which is always a huge pleasure. But I mean, in addition, we tend to do orchestral and choir gigs as well. So for instance, a group like Arcangelo or the Academy of Ancient Music, we do a lot of sort of orchestral recordings with them too. And it's always a pleasure to combine the orchestral work with the choir work. So you may have seen recently the videos of AAM with VOCES8. We did the Messiah twice this last 2 years. We did the Bach video that has just been released. You saw that actually in session, which I think is perhaps another interesting slant. Sorry, that's the doorbell. That's an interesting slant on seeing VOCES8 in a different light actually in session, which I think is a wonderful aspect to see. We also do, in addition to choirs, though, we do sort of chamber music, solo piano. There's lots of different things that we can do. Just because we do choral music mostly, it doesn't mean we can't do anything else. We do absolutely anything we can do, really, like chamber music, trios, solo piano, everything we do, which it sort of keeps us interested, really.
Okay. Now, when I introduced you, I introduced Adrian as the producer and Dave as the engineer. I imagine to some of our listeners, nobody really knows what that means. So could you just explain a little bit, Adrian, maybe you go first, just about what your role is on a VOCES8 session?
Sure. I think the business of making a record, I mean, obviously, Barney, you can kind of confirm or deny whether it's what it feels like from your end of the microphone, but I think it is an interesting three-way game. There is the artist, or the artists at one corner of the triangle. There's the sound engineer at another corner of the triangle, responsible for looking after all of the technical gear, the hardware. I mean, we shouldn't underestimate the amount of hardware that goes into these things, and the huge van that Dave has to run in order to lug it into every session. And the technical upkeep of all of that stuff, staying up with the technology. So the sound engineer, he's got to have all the gear: microphones, cables, computers, stands, lights, you name it. And then I kind of play the role in the middle somewhat, which is to sort of hopefully using the technology that Dave provides and using the talent that the artists have to try and bring it all together to get it to the best possible standard that it can be, both from the artist's point of view and from the technical point of view. Is that about as concise as I can put it, I think.
Very nice. Dave, would you like to add to that? Were you good?
Well, the role of an engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the first there and last to leave, which actually is a benefit, because when you're in beautiful buildings, you always enjoy. For instance, if you're in Westminster Abbey, you really enjoy being there on your own, which is a huge privilege, actually. But from the moment that you get there until the moment you leave, there's always things to think about, whether it be equipment or people. Actually, you've got to keep the people happy, and you've got to be sensitive to everything that they need. And one of the things that helps that is being a musician yourself, I think. Both Adrian and I are musicians, and so we put ourselves in the place of the musicians themselves, and we have to know exactly what they need. It's not just do your job and that's the end of it. We have to appreciate exactly what they're going through and what they need.
Yeah, I also think that the roles that you play with us are a little bit unique, because Adrian, especially you're there to be the middleman between the talent and the people who are running the mics. But I think because we sing without a director standing out, I perceive that your role, both in terms of running the session, working with me to try and get the timetabling right, making sure we achieve what we need to in a day, and also actually one of the things that we really enjoy about working with both of you is that because you're such good core musicians with so much experience, you help guide the artistic process a little bit. So often we will come to a session either singing a piece that we've never performed on stage, or a piece that we've performed a lot but maybe needs to be done slightly differently for the benefit of the process that we're going through. And we rely very much on your input. And so I think we often find ourselves saying, we'll sing this to you two ways, which one do you prefer? And so I think it's important that people appreciate that within the artistic process, you guys are also extremely important.
Well, I mean, it's nice for you to notice that the musical, that we come at it from a musical point of view rather than just a kind of technical point of view. I think that's the thing that matters to me most. I've been around quite a long time now, so I've heard there's not much that I haven't heard. What do I mean by that? I've got a good idea of what I think works. I mean, clearly I can't know every corner of the repertoire, but it doesn't really matter whether it's early music, Victorian music, or contemporary music. I feel, for me, it either sounds right or it doesn't. And that's an interpretational thing. I mean, very interestingly, Dave was talking about, we work with Arcangelo and Johnny Cohen. We recorded some cello sonatas 3 or 4 years ago with a wonderful player called Nick Altstedt, and the CPE Bach cello concertos. And it just all felt absolutely right. Johnny Cohen, it just felt right. I didn't know the piece. I'm not a cellist, but something about it felt absolutely right. And then about a week after we'd done the sessions, there was a version by an incredibly famous orchestra by an even more famous conductor on the radio, and it was all completely wrong. Everything about it was just wrong. And that's why it's nice to sort of come to a group like yours, and we all know each other as friends and colleagues, and to be able to have the time usually to have good sort of open discussions about how, and I think that's part of my role. Inevitably people come to sessions with an idea of what it is they want to do, and without saying that's not how it's wrong, you could say, okay, you've presented it like this. Have you thought of presenting it like this? And I think that's where, with my sort of experience, I'm always up just to try and offer options. I mean, it's music.
It's the idea of fresh ears, isn't it? We're aware that we've rehearsed something, and one of the things we talk about in the group a lot when we do question and answers is how we rehearse. And there's a massive benefit to being the same 8 singers all the time, because you get to know each other really well, but it can get very insular. And so we sing a piece to you that you may have never heard or never heard us sing, and immediately you come with a fresh perspective, and that set of fresh ears is incredible.
Yeah, and it's, I think with a group that's working together all the time, I won't say you rehearse bad habits, but on the other hand, there are things that you do. It's a bit like watching your children grow up. If you don't see them, if you see them every day, you don't notice that they grow. Yeah. My role coming into your groups, I only see you every few months, whatever it is. And there are little things which might just have gone off the boil slightly. I mean, maybe one just puts it like that, and just little things that just need a little scrubbing up in the corner. I really like that. And just also, it's worth saying that the business of coming in to record a group which, like your group, works together all the time is always a real treat. At the other end of the sort of professional spectrum, there are the groups that just it's a sort of hack bunch of singers out of somebody's address book who come in on not enough rehearsal to try and put something together. And there's a lot of that goes on, and that's always really difficult. The fact that you guys have got your house style and so on is always for me a treat. And I think Dave would say the same. From the sound point of view, the idea that you're the same bunch of the same 8 singers making the same sound all the time makes life it takes a whole load of headaches away, I think.
Sure. I'm going to come to the sound in a minute with Dave, but just, you mentioned, Adrian, in your spiel a minute ago about you when you hear something, you just know it's right. And I wonder if I could just ask you a little bit about when you're actually sitting there and the sound is coming through those headphones, how you're actually going about listening. Is it a very active thing where you're following the score and almost expecting to hear certain things and waiting to hear them, or is it a bit more of a passive thing where you sit back and let the music come to you and then just notice when it's not quite right? And how does that work? And I suppose the other thing along with that is, we've talked about the fact it's your job to run the session as well with me. So are you just thinking about the music that you're hearing, or are you thinking about the man management, the time management, cutting it? What's the mindset?
The answer is that it's all of those things, and sometimes it's a bit frustrating, because I know that I get a bit bogged down in the details sometimes. I mean, the details of tuning. Obviously your group has a reputation for singing everything squeakily cleanly in tune. So I don't want to be the first person to be responsible for it putting out something that's out of tune. So I have to
help us significantly with that. So we're very grateful.
I kind of have to get a bit obsessed with that, and that's a relentless pressure. On the other hand, the time management is also a relentless pressure, because if you get behind, that you can't really make it up. I mean, as it happens, your sessions are usually sort of rather open-ended, and we sort of get it right. We can work until we get it right. But if you're working with a professional orchestra and you've got 3 hours, and the minute you go 2 seconds over, you know that the second trumpet's going to start jumping up and down talking about overtime. That's tricky. On the other hand, sometimes when I get back to the edit stage, when I bring it here and bring it home, I am in the position sometimes of regretting that I've looked at it in so much focused detail, and I wish sometimes I'd actually sat back a little bit from it and just sort of taken a bit more of a view of the overall sound. It's difficult, and I can't really, sorry to be vague, but I can't really answer your question other than, as you put the question to me, I realise that I'm actually doing all of those things at the same time.
Sure.
And hopefully not compromising any one by all the others.
Yeah. Now, Dave, the sound, it appears that, I'm sure people listening to this, most of them like the sound of VOCES8. So how do you go about getting that? What's the way?
What, in terms of microphone techniques, or what we use, or
maybe a little bit of everything. So just so everyone, Dave is in charge of making it sound like it sounds. Adrian's in charge of getting the artistic quality. So Adrian. So we've spoken to Adrian, so Dave, go for it.
So we've done a lot of discs now together, and in the beginning we tried a lot of things with the group. Actually, we did a huge amount of testing with different microphones and different techniques. We put out lots of microphones and recorded them all, and we found that the best approach for this for VOCES8 was basically the simplest approach, because they do all the work. They balance it. They sound wonderful even before you start. So the simplest approach is definitely the best in VOCES8. Rather than putting out mics on every singer, microphones everywhere, we found that the best approach is to put a single. You've probably seen on the videos actually. We put a single pair in the middle of the group. Now we either do it as a circle around this pair, or we do it in a semicircle around this pair. When we're doing sessions in Chesterton, we do a lot of recording in Cambridge in a church in Chesterton. We mostly do it in a semicircle around simply one pair. In addition to that, we add a building pair, which captures the sort of the acoustic of the building, the reverb, but also a bit of colour too. The further you go away from the group, the more colour in the sound that you get, and the sort of the warmth of the group. So when we're recording, we basically use 4 microphones. 2 within the group and 2 further away, and the pair which is in the group, it's very specific how you have to set that particular pair up. The width of the microphones is very essential, but also one of the things that we found is that if we actually point the microphones up away from the singers, that softens off the sound of the group, which gives it a wonderful warmth. A very endearing warmth. Now the microphones that we use are omnidirectional microphones which pick up sound from everywhere. So in theory, if you face them away, you shouldn't be making any difference because they're omni all directions, but actually they're a little bit directional at high frequencies. So all those sibilances and all that kind of consonant stuff, and the edge of the voice too. If you point a microphone at somebody, it gets a bit edgy. But if you put a microphone close to somebody but pointing upwards or away, actually that's a really good technique that we found works really well.
Thank you. Now, I would love, and I've said this in a few of my Core Question Time streams, would love to do a little sort of documentary piece on in a bit more detail about how we go about making our recordings in terms of the workflows and the techniques we use. So I imagine that I'm going to be coming back to you guys for that. But in this show, we've been playing a lot of the music from the latest release, and I can't impress on our viewers enough the importance of the roles that the two of you have played in the creation of that material. So thank you, of course, for joining us today, but also a very big thank you for all of the fantastic work you do to create the art that we make, and for your insights today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hearing there from Adrian Peacock, producer, and David Hynett, engineer, whose fingerprints are all over our After Silence album as the people, the other side of the microphones. Now, you've joined us here, if you've just joined, for our album launch party. My studio guests have been telling me that they're still having a jolly good time, but we just have one more track to cover from our release today, After Silence 3 Redemption. It's not a small track, it's an entire cantata, in fact, by Johann Sebastian Bach, Cantata 150 Nach der Herr verlangt mich. Undoubtedly a masterpiece, but is 14 minutes long, so I'm not going to play the whole cantata on this show. But we will, however, be premiering the video of us recording the complete cantata with the Academy of Ancient Music straight away after this show here on Facebook. So please stay tuned for that. And yesterday, I caught up with the one member of VOCES8 who you haven't yet seen on this show to have a chat about this piece. And that is, of course, my alto buddy. It's Katie. So last and by no means least, this is Team Alto here to introduce for you the Bach cantata, which closes the disc. So Katie, do you want to tell us a little bit about the cantata?
Sure. So the cantata is called Nach der Herr verlanget mich. It's believed to be one of Bach's earliest church cantatas from around 1707. It's a fantastic work made up of about 7 different sections for choir, for orchestra, And there are some solo movements in there as well, including a trio movement. And it kind of follows a story from longing for God to assurance that he is with us.
Oh, very nice. Now, I remember when you were a VOCES8 scholar, and we did the 1610 Vespers and had a jolly good time. And it's definitely one of my favourite things to do, to sing this kind of more this sort of oratorio style work on an oratorio, this kind of work with orchestra, chorus and orchestra, to do that stuff with you as my alto buddy. And I think actually this probably for the whole project has been my highlight to record, not just because I get to sing with you, but also the pleasure of working and directing those fantastic musicians from the Academy of Ancient Music. It's a great alto part, so tell me, what do you think of it? What are your thoughts on the alto part in Bach?
I love it. Bach is just one of those composers where it really pays to be an alto. It's none of this just one note for a piece kind of thing. It's got so much to get your teeth into. I completely agree with how when we started out doing that Monteverdi is one of the first things that we did. And I find with quite a lot of this early music, I love doing this, particularly as a pair. I think we can both be quite competitive, so both try to out-music each other a little bit with phrasing and some of these things. I know I've certainly done that for the Monteverdi, and I know it's on my mind whenever we're doing Bach.
It's
I love
a
it.
subconscious thing, isn't it? It's like someone makes
Absolutely.
the shape and the other one gets so excited about the shape that the other one's made that they go at it with all their full force. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's competitive, but with encouragement, because if you give a really good idea, then I'm going to steal that, and you can take whatever I give you.
I think, this cantata, there's a video of the whole session, which I'm going to play in full, actually, on Facebook at the end of this little launch party. I'm going to finish the launch party by just playing one movement, but then it's going to be followed by the entire premiere of the video. And you can see, I think, that Team Alto is enjoying themselves. The other thing I think is absolutely terrific about this cantata is it's written in a style where the music is quite through composed. It's before the new style of cantata where we kind of got recit, aria, and that sort of thing. So there's an element of it being through composed, and in each of the chorus movements, he sort of uses an idea for about 10 or 20 bars, and then just completely changes tack to a new motif. And so you almost feel like one chorus is a mini cantata in itself. It's very thrilling to sing, and yeah, I think potentially my favourite piece on the whole album. So I want to ask you, Katie, actually, I've been asking everybody to answer the same 4 questions, so maybe we can both answer these. So the first question, you are very welcome to go first, is what is your favourite track on this part of the album? And you're not allowed to say the whole cantata. If you want to pick one of the cantata movements, that's fine, but you can't say the whole one. I
can do that. I think I'd pick the 4th movement from the cantata. That beginning, the Leite mich. I just think it's so gorgeous. It's especially as it travels through the voice parts, including then the orchestra as the final kind of 5th voice part. I think is really thrilling.
Okay, fantastic. And then I would say on this part of the album, it's really tough. I'm going to go with the movement that I'm going to play after this little piece, the two of us, which is the first chorus. So there's a symphonia at the beginning of the cantata, and then there's the chorus that takes the same name as the cantata Nach der Herr verlangt mich. I think just because of the way that the music is so versatile and the ideas change so quickly, and also this idea of the bum bum octave to start, and then the chromaticism, I just think it's so sets the music so perfectly well and so much fun to sing. So that's going to be my answer for that. Second one then is favourite track on the whole After Silence album. So anything from all of the chapters.
I really love the first instalment, so the first EP that we did, which I think we called Remembrance.
Yes.
And I love that one. My particular favourites, I think, would be, I love the Deer's Cry, the Arvo Pet. I think close second and third would be the Parry, There Is an Old Belief. The Parry is just an absolute favourite of mine. I love it. And the Bird, the Neus Iriscaris and Civitas Tui, Sancti Tui are just great.
Right, okay, so my favourite track on the whole album, I mean, this is an incredibly difficult choice. If I wasn't allowed to say the whole Bach cantata, I would probably say the Harris Bring Us, O Lord God, which I just think is the perfect marriage of text and music. And it's not a piece. A lot of people know Fair is the Heaven by the same composer, but Bring Us, O Lord God is not as well known globally. And I just think it's one of the most, it's a piece deserving of worldwide fame because it's so incredibly beautiful, text as well as music. All right then, fond memory from the session, something that you remember particularly in a joyful light.
Oh, there's quite a lot. I think recording sessions can so easily be quite stressful situations. We're lucky with quite a lot of this music that we had instrumentalists around, so they're always good fun to work with. And otherwise, the team does little things to try and keep everybody alive and mentally engaged. So I one of my favourites from the last couple of recording sessions is we've been bringing in various baked goods. So Andrea's done some fantastic flapjacks, and I was particularly proud of some gingerbread biscuits, which I took into the Cambridge session, which Barney decided were as good, if not slightly better than Preps, which I'm taking forever.
Very nice. Okay, so a good memory for me, I think, would be when we recorded the Mahler, because I felt that the Mahler was almost the perfect blend of teamwork. You know, it's obviously, I have this position of trying to pull everything together in the session, and I specifically remember afterwards thinking, you know what, what's just happened in that room has been a culmination of ideas from many people in just creating the score in the first place. Then we added, of course, Mary and Nick into the session. I remember Adrian, our producer, coming out and really talking to us about the music, and it was almost just like the perfect group collaborative environment. And that, you know, we speak so much, don't we, about functional democracy in VOCES8, and for me that was the perfectly captured in that moment. So that's what I'm going to go with. Last question, an embarrassing or funny or silly memory even from the sessions, anything stick out to you?
I'm not sure. Possibly the number of times that you and I got really confused over A naturals and A sharps and that stick movement of the Bach. I think there are a decent number of outtakes which probably end in some expletives as to how many times we got it wrong.
Yeah, to give our listeners insight into that, but Bach doesn't actually ever write A sharp, does he? But we have done it with directors before who've always asked us to sharp the A, and so it's so in my muscle memory to do it, and you harmonically often really hear it and want to do it. And yeah, there's quite a few. I cut together the video of the session material, and there's quite a few times where one of our hand goes up because we made the mistake and the man movement having to cut around it. And at one point you just look at me like this and I'm like, it's great. I would say something that really sticks out for me is something that never happened to the group before, which is that we had to call off a day of the sessions. Do you remember we were recording in a church in Chesterton in Cambridge, and we got in there, and we started about 11 o'clock in the morning. We got to about midday and the wind picked up, and the wind got so loud outside. It was one of the storm. Can you remember the name of the storm? I can't remember the storm. There was a storm.
Can't remember.
No, I can't remember. That we actually had to cancel the rest of the day. And it's never happened to us before. But I remember sort of, because obviously our schedule is quite tight anyway, trying to figure out what on earth we were going to make up for the missed time. But yeah, that was something that will stick in my head for sure. But Katie, it's been so nice catching up. We are now going to play the first chorus, so the second movement, first chorus of Bach's fantastic cantata, Nach der Herr verlanget mich, and then we'll be premiering the whole cantata at the end of this launch party, so stay tuned. Nach der Herr verlanget mich. The first chorus of Bach's cantata number 150, Nach der Herr verlanget mich, which closes our chapter 3 of the After Silence project. That's called Redemption. You can hear the whole cantata on the album. Thank you so much for joining me today. This brings an end to our album launch party. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as my guests here in the studio. I said right at the beginning of the programme that during this period of isolation, we are using the time to train and develop our skills in presenting these online presentations. So if you have any comments about things you've enjoyed, things you'd like to see perhaps done a little bit differently, then we'd be really pleased to read about them. So either drop me an email or stick some thoughts on the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. Our album is based around that beautiful quote by Aldous Huxley. So I thought just before I leave today, I might finish with another of Huxley's quotes. But just a reminder that we're going to be premiering the whole of that cantata here on Facebook next. So please stay tuned for that. Thanks again, and here's some Huxley. The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. Thank you.